Chapter 14. On the eve of their return to Plainview, Bill mentioned the Warriors had invited him to a soccer game on their last night, and Marci informed him that she had been invited as guest of honor to a party hosted by the priests. "My night sounds a lot more fun than yours. Party with those old fossils? Enjoy," Bill snorted. "The party's for me anyway, Bill." Marci rolled over, yawning. "You weren't even invited. But let's meet back here at midnight tomorrow and at least leave together. Less fuss." The following evening, after Bill and his Mayan friends attended something resembling a soccer game, albeit with a human skull versus a ball, the crowds were abuzz with excitement over the evening's musical performance, or something pantomime to that effect, as they pointed to the dais above. Meanwhile, Marci was feted Cinderella style, as several berobed ladies entered behind Amari, bathing and perfuming her before dressing her in regal Mayan fashion. She was led to an empty moonlit balcony and seated upon a large stone bench, where she began to uncomfortably suspect this might be a surprise party, the space otherwise empty and feebly lit. Amari smiled weakly, inspecting his nails while they waited. The priests entered, all save Mwanadi the elder, still on scientific pilgrimage. Ilari Chi warmly embraced Marci, sneakily slipping a knotted rope around her arms, cinching it tightly as he stepped back, a wicked grin on his shining face. "Sorry, Marci," Amari called out as he left her side, retreating to the shadows with a look of genuine regret. Torches were lit by silent-footed temple disciples, illuminating the red stains of recent sacrifices, coating the stone bench upon which Marci was seated. She heard a distant cheering, cocking her head only to realize this was no balcony. This was the sacrificial terrace of the pyramid. The priest sprang forward, efficiently securing Marci face up atop the stone altar. "Who is in charge? I am going to need to speak to someone in charge," she demanded firmly, struggling to reach the knots of her restraints, a finger wagging from her tied hand. Ilari Chi thrust his wrinkled face next to hers, explaining curtly, "Bad year." Down in the thick of the crowds, pushing for a better view of the show, Bill cheered drunkenly, having lost track of time. Therefore, bleary-eyed and buzzed, it took several moments for his brain to properly process just what it was he was cheering so vehemently for. As Marci desperately worked her fingers around the hemp rope that bound her, she searched the bloodthirsty crowds below, and even with her view transposed, immediately recognized her husband's pale, sweating face, applauding her sacrifice. Ilari Chi raised his arms into the air, the cheers intensifying as Bill heard in the distance, like a mosquito buzzing in his ear, the familiar twang of his wife's strident, angry voice. Tilting his head, Bill spotted the moon terrace at the top of the central pyramid. "Really, Bill? Well, this is some bullshit." Marci flailed against the knotted ropes. Not a concert, a sacrifice. Bound, strapped to the altar, tipped upside down, haranguing Ilari Chi in a vicious tone he recognized all too well, ordering the cowardly priest to stop their ridiculous charade for their made-up gods, dear Lord, was Marci Finkle. Bill sobered immediately, blanching as he glanced down at the timer on his watch, the numbers rapidly descending. Ignoring the warning cries of his warrior friends, he bound up the steep steps of the pyramid, shouting over the din. You wait one goddamn minute, mister. That's my wife you've got tied to that massage table. If you would just wait 1 minute or two, I can explain her sense of humor. Ilari Chi turned from the crowd, performatively pulling the bone knife from its sheath at his waist, holding it aloft in one hand, sharp white edges of the blade outlined by the moonlight, the other hand motioning for silence, which fell across the gathered crowds, save for Bill's labored demands to stop.
I am sure she didn't mean to offend you. Whatever she said.
The priest began chanting as Ilari turned to stand over Marci's wriggling form, hands frantically working the knots securing her to the altar. Ilari dramatically raised the knife over Marci's chest, allowing the blade to hover there for several long moments as Bill struggled to pull himself onto the lip of the sacrificial terrace. The priest's eyes trained solely on the ceremony before them, unbothered by the commotion below. Chanting hypnotically, Ilari took the bone handle of the knife with both hands, the blade slowly descending as Marci screamed, "No!" Scrambling to rise on shaking, depleted legs, his arms outstretched, reaching for Marci, Bill screamed, "No!" Imari covered his eyes, screaming, "No!" Boom. Whoosh. The sacrificial knife struck stone, bouncing from Ilari fingers to the tile floor beneath him. It was eerily silent. Ilari stared at his empty hands, unable to believe what he'd just seen. Having spent his life in the pursuit of power and carnal satisfaction, he'd never actually believed in the gods. Until now. Imari uncovered his eyes to a pile of hemp rope tangled upon the sacrificial altar where Marci had just lay. Both the questionable sacrifice and the man who had tried to save her splendidly raptured. The crowds erupted into wild cheers. The township had a very good crop that year. Wanadi, the eldest, triumphantly returned from his pilgrimage the day after the heralded ceremony, saving the sinking city just as Bill foretold in his sacred drawings. For when Wanadi reached the meteor impact site, the crater was filled with water from the rains. The rainwater seeping through the channel scored into the earth around the crater, creating lines of irrigation. Seeing this, Wanadi understood that building canals from the sinking city to the outlying lowlands would not only drain the city's land, but also provide irrigation for the dying crops. Bill had saved them all with his great knowledge before returning with the oracle into the ethos from which they'd sprung just as mysteriously and suddenly as they'd arrived. The legend of Bill and Marci, the celestial twins, would be sung for eons by the Mayan peoples.